Hello, today we're going to talk about the powers of 10. Now we've talked a little bit about these exponents, but now look at here, we got negative exponents. We're going to come back to those guys in just a minute. So if you look up here, we need to convert these powers of 10 as fractions and as decimals. Now let's start with the fractions first. Now, if you have 10 to the first, 10 to the first is the same thing as saying 10. And we all know that 10 is equal to 10. So as a fraction, it would be 10 over 1 or 10. So here you have 10 squared. Now real quick, what does that mean? 10 times 10. Well, what's 10 times 10? 100. But you have to write it as a fraction. So that's going to be 100 over 1. And of course, some of you would like to simplify it, and there's our 100. So now let's look up here at the 10 cubed. So that's 10 times 10 times 10. And what is that? That's right, it's 1,000. But we have to write it as a fraction, and we're going to make that our numerator, and our 1 is going to be our denominator. Now look at 10 to the fourth. That's 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. So it's 10,000 over 1, or 10,000. Now real quick, let's take a moment. Does anybody notice anything that's happening with our numbers? That's right. You should see that each time we add to our exponent, we're actually gaining a 0. Great connection. Now real quick, let's transfer this over to the decimal side. So if you've got 10,000, what is 10,000 as a decimal? That's right, 10,000. 1,000 is simply 1,000. 100 over 1, 100. And 10 over 1 is 10. Now let's talk about the 0. Wow. Now you can't say 10 to the 0 because that doesn't work. It's like saying 10 has no zeros, which is 1. Now let me give you a little tip about the power of 0. Anytime the exponent is 0, the base, no matter what it is, when you find the value of it, it's always going to be 1. So again, anytime you have an exponent of 0, it's going to be a 1. So now let's look at our negative numbers. So here you have 10 to the negative 1. Now what we need to do is kind of make it its inverse, which means you're going to flip it so that instead of it being on top, it's coming down to the denominator spot. So that's 1/10 to the power of 1. So that's literally 1/10. Now let's look here with it to negative 2. Again, you're going to bring that negative 10 to the negative 2 down. So now you have, what's 10 squared? 100. So 1 over 100. Okay, you got 10 to the negative 3. So again, drop it down to the denominator spot. So what's 10 cubed? That's right, it's 1,000. Now notice they're in the denominator spot, so I've kept them in the denominator spot. All right, and here's 10 to the negative 4th. Very good. So that's 1/10,000. So now we're going to convert them over to decimals. As we said, that 10 to the 0, it's always going to be 1. So now you've got 10, or 1/10. How do you write 1/10 as a decimal? That's right, 0.1. Nice. How about 100th? Because that's what that says, 100th. So 0.01. All right, how about the next one? That's right, 1,000. And that's, excuse me, 100, or excuse me, 1/10, or 10,000, sorry. So 0.0001. Very good. So let's take a moment. So explain in words what pattern exists with the fractions for the powers of 10. Well, you're either, if you're positive, you are adding a 0 to the end. And if it ends up being negative, you're adding a 0 to the denominator. All right, now what do you notice about the decimals? Well, let's take a quick picture. You notice again, if it's positive, we're adding zeros, and if it's negative, we're always adding a 0 and pushing that decimal place out a little bit further. So, positive, we are going to add a 0 to the end. Sorry, the paper's slipping. And then when it's a negative exponent, you are moving out 1 decimal place. Alrighty, so there's our lesson on powers of 10.